The coffee didn't just spill, it struck the diner's tile with a harsh splatter that cut through the room. In that instant, every voice fell silent. Not because it was an accident, but because the sheriff's deputy had tipped the mug deliberately, watching with a grin as the dark liquid pooled across the floor, creeping toward the paws of the German shepherd seated flawlessly beside the booth. What followed was a silence heavier than clinking dishes or the low whir of aging ceiling fans. Everyone understood this had nothing to do with coffee. The man in the booth didn't react right away. He didn't argue, didn't tense, didn't even blink. The uniformed men surrounding him studied his every move, waiting for a spark they could ridicule or crush. Instead, he kept one hand relaxed on the tabletop, the other hovering near the dog's collar, steady, restrained, as if he were holding back something far more powerful than a trained animal. It felt like years of discipline were etched into his posture. Before we go further, take a second to like, repost, or share. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Back to the diner. Luna, the German shepherd, sensed the shift before anyone else. Her ears flicked as the scent of scalding coffee blended with fear and arrogance. Still, she didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on her handler's face. She trusted him completely. She had been trained to read the smallest changes in his breathing, his stance, his energy. Right now, he was immovable, solid, unshaken. "You heard me," the deputy barked. "Clean it up, and do it fast." His voice carried across the room, loud enough for everyone to hear. Another officer snorted with laughter. Nudging his partner like this was nothing more than entertainment during a dull shift. A few customers suddenly became very interested in menus they weren't reading. It was easier to look away. The waitress froze near the counter, fingers trembling around a coffee pot. Her eyes darted between the badges and the man in camouflage. Something about him felt wrong, not threatening, just out of place. He sat straight despite the insult, his gaze unwavering, calm yet sharp, like a blade still sheathed. Slowly, the man glanced at the spreading mess, then lifted his eyes to the deputy. For a brief moment, something changed in them. Not anger, but recognition. The look of someone who had seen this before, in places far darker than a roadside diner. Places where authority was abused and mercy was scarce. "You done?" he asked quietly. His voice was level, controlled, completely free of threat, and that somehow made it worse. Bullies don't want calm. They want reaction. The deputy scoffed and leaned closer, his badge nearly brushing the man's chest. That was when he truly noticed the dog. Not just saw her, but understood her. The tension in her muscles, the precision in her stillness. Her eyes followed every movement without fear or aggression, just readiness. "Nice dog," the deputy said, smirking. He nudged the cup with his boot, pushing the coffee closer. Be a shame if she learned to bite the wrong person. That was when a man finally stood, slowly enough that no one could accuse him of aggression. As he reached his full height, the room felt smaller, tighter. The air changed. Even the officer laughing moments ago fell silent, sensing something old, dangerous, and patient. The man reached into his pocket, not fast, not sudden, and pulled out a worn pair of dog tags. They dangled loosely in his hand as he met the deputy's eyes. "You might want to rethink how you're starting your day," he said calmly. No one realized it yet, but the line had already been crossed. This wasn't about coffee, or a dog, or pride. It was about the fact that they had chosen the wrong stranger. The quiet man in that diner had survived things they only pretended to be brave enough to face. He had learned long ago that patience could be the most lethal response of all. The dog tags caught the light for a split second. That moment was enough to shift the deputy's expression, not because he understood what they represented, but because confidence like that, calm after humiliation, usually comes from experience, not bravado. The man let the tags fall back into his palm and sat down again without being told. "You think that scares me?" the deputy said, forcing a laugh that rang hollow as he glanced at his partners. One of them laughed too loudly, though his eyes kept flicking toward Luna. She hadn't moved, hadn't growled, hadn't broken discipline. She might as well have been carved from stone. The man finally scanned the diner, meeting the eyes of those pretending not to watch. When he spoke, his voice carried just far enough to be heard. I came here to eat, same as everyone else. I didn't come looking for trouble. That's so, the deputy replied, crossing his arms. Because trouble tends to follow dogs like that. The man nodded once. Yeah, sometimes it does. Mostly when people don't know when to stop. An elderly cook behind the counter cleared his throat. His voice shook, but there was resolve in it. Son, he said to the deputy, maybe you should just let him be. The deputy spun, anger flashing, but before he could respond, the diner door opened. A tall man in a crisp uniform stepped inside. His presence was immediate, commanding. His eyes swept the room and locked onto the scene at the booth. Sheriff, one of the officers muttered. The sheriff approached slowly, taking in the spilled coffee, his deputy's rigid stances, the man in camouflage, and finally the German shepherd, who watched him calmly. Alert, assessing, but not hostile. What's going on here? He asked. Before anyone else could answer, the man stood again, turning just enough for the sheriff to see the patch on his sleeve and the insignia he had never bothered to hide. No trouble, he said evenly. Just breakfast. Recognition flickered in the sheriff's eyes as he noticed the markings, the posture, the scars that didn't come from training mishaps. His tone shifted instantly. Sir, he said carefully, may I see your ID? The man handed it over without comment. As the sheriff read it, the color drained from his face. His jaw tightened. The name belonged to someone discussed behind closed doors. Someone who didn't make headlines. Someone whose record couldn't be summarized on a single page. He returned the ID with both hands. My apologies, he said firmly, then turned to his deputies. His voice dropped, heavy with authority. All of you, outside, now. No one argued. No one laughed. Chairs scraped as they retreated, confidence replaced by something much closer to fear. The man sat down and finally exhaled. Luna relaxed just a fraction, pressing her shoulder against his leg. He rested his hand on her head, grounding them both. The waitress approached quietly and set down a fresh cup of coffee. On the house, she whispered. He nodded once in thanks. No smile was needed. Justice doesn't always come with shouting or handcuffs. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through exposure, consequence, and dignity intact. As he finished his meal, the diner slowly returned to life. But no one forgot what they had witnessed, and the deputies outside learned a lesson they would carry for a long time. Power means nothing without restraint, and the most dangerous people in the room are often the ones who never announce who they are. This story has touched millions. If it touched you too, let us know with a like, comment, yes, and follow or subscribe for more powerful stories like this.